You think you can just walk in here after all this time and tell me I have a son? You have no shame trying to pin something on me, Ulima. Ulima stood outside Uchenna's office building, her heart pounding in her chest. The city buzzed around her, vibrant and alive, but she felt trapped in her own world, where nothing made sense anymore. Emeka's life hung in the balance, and now she had to confront the man she had once loved. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside the building, her footsteps echoing in the polished marble lobby. The receptionist greeted her with a warm smile, but Ulima felt nothing but dread as she asked for Uchenna. He's in a meeting, but I can schedule an appointment for you, the receptionist said. No, it's urgent. I have to speak with him now, Ulima insisted, her voice firm despite her shaking hands. After a moment of hesitation, the receptionist nodded and buzzed Uchenna's office. Mr. Ejike, there's someone here to see you. It's Ulima. Silence fell on the line, and the receptionist glanced at Ulima with a hint of concern before gesturing for her to go ahead. You can go in. As she rushed open the door, the familiar scent of cologne and polished wood engulfed her, sending a wave of nostalgia crashing over her. Uchenna sat behind his large desk, papers strewn about, but his attention snapped to her the moment she entered. His expression shifted from surprise to something colder. Ulima, he said, his voice a mix of disbelief and disdain. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you, she replied, forcing herself to maintain eye contact, even as his expression shifted to one of irritation. What's there to talk about? You shouldn't have come here. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms defensively, especially after everything that happened. Ulima took a step closer, her heart racing. I understand that you might not want to see me, but this is important. It's about Emeka. Uchenna's brow furrowed, confusion flashing in his eyes. Emeka? Who is that? Why should I care? His tone was harsh, laced with bitterness. Because he's your son, Uchenna, Ulima said, the words spilling out in a rush. You have a son. Emeka is ours. The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. Uchenna's expression shifted from irritation to shock, his mouth opening and closing as he processed the revelation. What are you talking about? He finally managed, disbelief coloring his voice. Ulima continued, her heart pounding. I know this is a lot to take in, but please, let me explain. 6 years ago, I was pregnant when I left your home. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought you would hate me for what happened. I thought it was for the best. But now, Emeka needs help. He needs surgery, and you might be his only hope. Uchenna stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. You think you can just walk in here after all this time and tell me I have a son? You have no shame trying to pin something on me, Ulima. After everything, after the lies, the betrayal, you expect me to believe you? His voice was rising, filled with anger and hurt. Please listen to me, Ulima pleaded, her composure wavering. I never wanted to deceive you. I was thrown out and I had no one to turn to. I raised Emeka alone and I have done everything I could for him. But now he is sick and I don't know what else to do. You need to understand. Uchenna shook his head, stepping back as if her words physically repulsed him. How can I trust you? You disappeared, Ulima. You've lived your life while I was left in the dark, believing I was betrayed. You made your choices. Don't expect me to accept this so easily. His words cut deep, and Ulima's heart sank. She had expected anger, but hoped for understanding. I know I hurt you, Uchenna, but I've spent every day regretting what happened between us. I would give anything to change that, to change the past. But right now, it's about Emeka. He's in the hospital, fighting for his life, and I need your help. Uchenna's expression softened for a brief moment, but the anger quickly returned. You shouldn't have come here. I don't want to be a part of your mess, Ulima. Whatever happened between us is in the past. Tears pricked at her eyes, But she fought them back. I understand you're angry, but this is not about us. This is about our son. He needs you. Enough! Uchenna snapped, slamming his palm on the desk. You've made your choices. I won't be responsible for your mistakes. With those final words, he turned away from her, leaving Ulima standing there, feeling utterly defeated. She had reached out, laid her heart bare, and all she received in return was scorn. But as she turned to leave, a small flicker of determination ignited within her. She would not give up on Emeka, not now, not ever. Whether Uchenna accepted the truth or not, she would fight for her son's life. Even if it meant facing Uchenna again, she would do whatever it took to save Emeka. Ulima stood her ground, the weight of Uchenna's words still echoing in her mind. She had come here seeking help, and instead she felt more lost than ever. But as the silence stretched between them, she realized that the only way forward was to confront Uchenna directly, to make him face the truth they both had avoided for so long. Uchenna, she began, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions swirling within her. I know you are angry, and you have every right to be, but we can't keep pretending that our past does not matter. You can't run from this. He turned to her, eyes blazing with unresolved anger. And you think confronting me will change anything? You deceived me, Ulima. You kept my son from me. Did I? She shot back, her frustration rising. Did I really have a choice? I was thrown out of your house, left alone to raise Emeka in a world that didn't want me. You didn't care enough to find out what happened, did you? You believed the lies. Uchenna clenched his fist, struggling to contain the turmoil within. You think it was easy for me? I was left to believe you had betrayed me, that you had moved on without a second thought. I was heartbroken, and now you want me to just accept that you're standing here with a child I never knew existed? Ulima's chest tightened at the pain in his voice, but she refused to back down. This isn't just about you, Uchenna. Emeka is innocent in all of this. He is sick, and he needs you. You are his father, and you have a responsibility, whether you like it or not. Responsibility? Uchenna scoffed, anger lacing his words. You expect me to take responsibility after you deceived me, after all this time. Stop acting like I had control over what happened to us, Ulima cried, her voice rising. I loved you, Uchenna, I still do, but I had to survive. I had to protect our son. His expression faltered, and for a moment, Ulima saw the flicker of vulnerability behind his anger. You don't get to decide what's best for me, Ulima. Not anymore. She stepped closer, desperation fueling her resolve. Then let's find out the truth together. If you think I'm lying, let's do a DNA test. I won't let your suspicions destroy my son's chance at life. You can confront the truth, or you can continue to live in this anger. Uchenna's brow furrowed, and he let out a sharp breath, his shoulders tense. A DNA test? Yes, Ulima replied firmly. If that is what it would take for you to accept Emeka, then let's do it. Uchenna's gaze softened for just a moment before his walls came crashing down. You think I can just take your word for it after everything? Why can't you see that I'm trying to make this right? She countered, tears threatening to spill over. I am angry too, Uchenna. Angry at how things turned out. Angry that you think I would ever lie about something like this. You may not trust me, but I trusted you once. Did you ever love me? His silence was deafening, and she could see the internal battle raging within him. Guilt, remorse, and lingering anger flickered across his face, but he held his ground, refusing to show any vulnerability. I can't just forget everything that happened, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. You might have had my child, but that doesn't erase the pain you caused. Ulima felt the heat of tears pulling in her eyes. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to be with you, but the world we were in made it impossible. I am not the enemy here, Uchenna. We both have to face what happened, but right now, we need to focus on Emeka. He looked away, wrestling with his emotions. What if I find out he's not mine? Then I'll accept whatever you decide, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. But you owe it to Emeka to find out. He deserves a chance, no matter what your past looks like. No matter what our past look like. Uchenna hesitated, his hardened exterior cracking under the weight of their shared history. Finally, he nodded slowly, though the anger still simmered beneath the surface. Fine. We'll do the DNA test, but understand, Ulima, this isn't over. Neither is my fight for Emeka, she replied, the strength of her conviction shining through the tears that had finally spilled down her cheeks. As she turned to leave, Ulima felt a mixture of relief and apprehension wash over her. She had forced Uchenna to confront his feelings, but the road ahead remained uncertain. Would he be able to look past the anger and betrayal to embrace the son they shared? Time would tell, but for now, she had taken the first step towards securing Emeka's future. After being abandoned by Uchenna, Ulima had leaned on her faith in Christ, and now in the days leading up to surgery, she was determined to stay strong for Emeka. The drive back to Lagos was filled with a mix of anxiety and uncertainty. Uchenna glanced at Ulima, who sat quietly in the back seat, her gaze fixed out the window. Emeka, nestled in his mother's arms, was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. As they approached the familiar streets of the city, memories flooded Uchenna's mind. Happy times, spent with friends, laughter echoing through the halls of his family home, and most vividly, the moments he had shared with Ulima before everything had shattered. As they arrived at the hospital, Ulima's heart raced. The stark white walls and the sterile smell of antiseptic filled her with dread. Emeka's surgery loomed ahead, a daunting reality that threatened to pull her under. She could barely breathe as she watched the doctors prep for the procedure, every beep of the machines sending waves of panic through her. Please, God, she whispered, clutching Emeka's tiny hand. I can't lose him. He's my everything. In the days leading up to the surgery, Ulima's faith had become her lifeline. She had turned to prayer, filling her evenings with quiet supplications, seeking solace in her newfound relationship with Jesus. Despite the pain of her past, she had found strength in the belief that she was not alone. Jesus, I need you more now than ever, she often cried, tears streaming down her face as she poured out her heart. She prayed for Emeka's healing, for guidance, and for the courage to face whatever lay ahead. Uchenna watched Ulima from a distance, his heart aching for her. He wanted to comfort her, but every time he tried, the words felt inadequate, as if they would dissolve in the face of her grief. Finally, in a moment of desperation, he approached her. Can I pray with you? He asked hesitantly, unsure of how she would respond. Ulima looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes. You don't believe in all of that, she replied softly, her voice trembling. I don't. But I'll try, he said, taking a deep breath. For Emeka. As they joined hands, Ulima felt the warmth of his palm against hers. She closed her eyes, taking a moment to gather her thoughts before speaking. Dear Lord, she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Please watch over our son. Please give him strength and let him know he is loved. Uchenna listened, his heart swelling with admiration and pain. He had never seen this side of Ulima, this fierce devotion. In that moment, he felt a sense of something, a connection rekindled amidst the chaos. When the day of the surgery arrived, the tension in the air was palpable. Ulima's hands shook as she kissed Emeka's forehead, her heart aching at the thought of losing him. She clung to him, vowing to follow him into the unknown if that was the path set before them. I won't leave you, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. You're my last connection to the world. Uchenna stood nearby, his chest tightening as he witnessed Ulima's anguish. The sight of her brokenness struck a chord deep within him. He realized how much he had missed in the years past, the years apart, the love, the warmth, the laughter. In those moments of fear, he felt his resolve strengthening. This boy, this innocent child, was a part of him. As the hours dragged on, Ulima fell into a cycle of prayer and despair. Please, God, have mercy, she cried, feeling the weight of her past and the uncertainty of her future. I need him to survive. Uchenna observed her silently, torn between his emotions. The woman he had known was still there, but she had transformed. The pain had shaped her, but so had her faith. He felt helpless, wanting to alleviate her suffering, but unsure how. Finally, as the clock ticked closer to the moment of truth, they prepared to confront the ghost of their past. The atmosphere grew charged with tension as Ulima and Uchenna made their way to the Ejike mansion, each step heavy with the weight of their shared history. Nneka was unprepared for their return, and Uchenna could feel the anxiety radiating off Ulima as they approached the door. As they entered, the familiar opulence of the mansion felt suffocating. The memories flooded back. Nneka's laughter, the grand parties, the life they had envisioned together. Now, it was tainted by betrayal and pain. They were stepping back into a world that had once felt like home, but now held nothing but tension and unresolved feelings. When Nneka caught sight of them, her expression shifted from shock to disbelief. What are you doing here? Nneka hissed, her voice dripping with disdain. We are here for Emeka, Ulima stated firmly, her voice unwavering despite the fear coursing through her. He needs help and he deserves to know his family. Uchenna stood beside her, a newfound determination burning in his chest. And I am not going to let anything happen to him. Not again. As the tension thickened in the room, Ulima realized that she was no longer the scared girl who had been thrown out 6 years ago. She had fought for her son, and she would continue to fight for him, no matter what it took and no matter who she had to fight. Ulima stood firm, her heart pounding as she faced Nneka. The truth about the conspiracy lay heavy on her tongue, and she could feel the weight of it pressing down on her. You thought you could keep us apart, didn't you? She challenged, her voice steady. You twisted the narrative, manipulated everyone into believing I was the villain, but I won't let you do it anymore. Nneka opened her mouth to respond, but Ulima cut her off. I fought for my son, and I will not let your lies destroy our family. Her eyes burned with intensity, a stark contrast to the meekness of the girl she used to be. As the tension hung in the air, Uchenna took Ulima's hand, guiding her toward a guest room to rest. They were both exhausted from the emotional toll of waiting at the hospital, the anxiety gnawing at them like a relentless tide. Ulima, however, found it difficult to focus on anything beyond her son's plight. I don't want to give her any more of my energy, she muttered, frustration lacing her tone. Not when Emeka is in there fighting for his life. Uchenna watched her with concern, sensing the apprehension about their rekindling relationship. She was a different woman now, a woman forged by hardship and resilience. The girl he had loved 6 years ago, full of hope and dreams, felt like a distant memory, frozen in time on that bitterly cold night. Now she was weary of the blinding love that once enveloped her. If Nneka wants you, she can have you, Ulima thought bitterly, but not until my son is safe. She urged Uchenna to drive her back to the hospital, her worries resurfacing despite the doctor's assurances that the surgery would take 6 hours. I can't just sit here while he's in there, she insisted, anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. Please, Ulima, Uchenna pleaded softly. Just a little rest. You need to gather your strength. He placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to soothe her frantic thoughts. Think of it as a moment of prayer. God will watch over Emeka while you take care of yourself. Reluctantly, Ulima nodded, her exhaustion winning over her fears. After he made sure she was settled in, he returned to his own room, determined to ignore Nneka, who was still fuming downstairs. As he undressed, he felt the lingering scent of the hospital clinging to him, a reminder of the tension and desperation that filled the air. Rummaging through his closet for clean clothes, his foot caught on a stray shoe, causing him to stumble. As he bent down to regain his balance, a letter tumbled from the upper shelves, fluttering to the floor. He picked it up, his heart sinking as he recognized the familiar handwriting. It was the letter Ulima had written on that cold October night, a letter that had haunted him ever since. Uchenna, my love, come for Uli before their lies tear us apart, it began. the words echoing in his mind like a desperate plea from the past. He unfolded the letter, each stroke of her pen a reminder of the love they had shared, now tangled in the web of betrayal and misunderstanding. I am lost without you, she had written, her vulnerability laid bare. The world feels darker, and I feel it will consume me if you don't come back. I miss the laughter we shared and the dreams we painted together. I fear the lies are spreading and no one will believe my truth. Please come for me. We can fight this together. My heart aches for you, Uchenna, and my soul cries out for your love. Don't let them win. Tears blurred his vision as he read her words, each line dripped with desperation, her pain palpable through the ink. He could almost hear her voice, tinged with sorrow and yearning. The memories of their love washed over him like a tide, sweet, tender moments overshadowed by the heartbreak that had followed. Uchenna's heart broke as he realized how far they had drifted. The intensity of Ulima's emotions was almost suffocating, and he could feel the weight of her suffering pressing down on him. What have I done? He whispered, a mix of regret and longing flooding through him. He had let her down, allowed the lies to separate them, and now their son was caught in this crossfire. With renewed determination, he vowed to defend Ulima and their son. Steeling himself, he walked out of his room and confronted Eneka. A fire ignited within him. You will not speak ill of her, he declared, his voice firm and unwavering. Ulima has done nothing but fight for our son. She is the mother of my child, and I will support her no matter what. The room felt silent, the weight of his declaration hanging in the air. He felt the shift within him, a resolve that would not waver in the face of adversity. Uchenna was ready to confront the past and stand up for the family he had almost lost. The tension in the air was palpable as Uchenna stood before Nneka, determined to protect Ulima and their son. His heart raced, aware that the arrival of his parents could shift the fragile balance they had just established. As if on cue, the front door swung open and Mr. and Mrs. Ejike entered, their expressions shifting from casual to alarmed upon seeing the scene unfolded before them. Nneka wasted no time, launching into her familiar tale of betrayal. Mother, father, look who's here, she exclaimed, her voice dripping with venom. The hussy who thought she could waltz back into our lives and take what's mine. Mrs. Ejike's face flushed with rage at the mention of Ulima, who had been nothing but a painful reminder of her son's indiscretions. How dare she come here? This is my son's home, she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. The commotion steered Ulima from her thoughts. From the upstairs landing, she observed the confrontation with a mix of anger and indifference. She felt like a spectator in her own life, but when she heard her son being called a bastard, her resolve shattered. A fire ignited within her, and she stormed downstairs, her heart pounding. Enough, she cried, her voice cutting through the chaos. You will not speak of Emeka that way. The room felt silent, all eyes on her. You think you can just label him because of your lies? She stepped forward, fueled by a mixture of rage and heartbreak. Do you think I would allow your words to define my son? I have fought too hard to protect him from the likes of you. With each word, the tension escalated. Ulima turned her focus to Eneka, the architect of this misery. I have seen the looks between you and Adekule, the secret meetings you thought you hid so well. Do you really think I will stand by while you toy with my family? Her voice trembled with emotion, but she stood firm, no longer the timid girl they once knew. Then her eyes turned to Mr. Okafor Ejike and Mrs. Chidinma Ejike. Pain etched on her face. How will you answer my parents? She asked, her voice cracking. They entrusted me to you because of your friendship with my father. He was the one who gave you the first pot of gold to start your business. What will you tell them now when they find out the truth? The room felt heavy with guilt as Uchenna watched his parents, their faces pale. Ulima, Okafor began, his voice thick with shame, but Ulima cut him off. No, I need to know. What will you say to my father? Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, the weight of her past bearing down on her. The years of being dismissed, the name calling, the shame, it all threatened to consume her. Uchenna stepped forward, compelled to defend Ulima. How could you let this happen? He demanded, turning to his parents. Do you not see what your actions have wrought? Ineka has manipulated all of us. He glanced at Ineka, who looked taken aback by his accusation. Ulima's heart swelled with gratitude as she felt a warmth spreading through her, a sense of vindication. The shroud of shame that had covered her head for so long began to lift, and the silent tears streamed down her cheeks. Finally, she whispered, I can speak my truth. As emotions ran high, Ineka's facade began to crack. The realization of the consequences of her actions bore down on her, and she staggered back, her confidence evaporating. You're supposed to be mine, Uchenna, she cried, her voice wavering. We were meant to be together. Uchenna shook his head, disappointment etched on his face. Not anymore, Ineka. This engagement is over. Ulima felt a weight lift off her chest, her heart, the fear and shame she had carried for so long dissipating. As Uchenna declared his commitment to her, she realized she was no longer alone in this fight. I can't stay here, Ulima said, her voice steady. I need to be with my son. The tension shifted from uncertainty to hostility as the implications of Uchenna's decision began to unfold. Mrs. Ejike's expression hardened, disbelief mingling with fury. You can't just abandon Ineka like this, she shouted, as if the words could somehow alter the reality of the situation. Why not? Uchenna retorted, his voice rising. I've been blind to the truth for too long. Ineka has played us for all fools, and I won't be a part of it any longer. Ineka's eyes glistened with unshed tears, a mixture of anger and desperation flooding her features. You can't mean that. You don't know what you're throwing away, she cried, her voice breaking. I have loved you since we were children. That is not love, Ulima interjected, her voice steady. That is possession. You thought you could control him by using lies and manipulation. It's time for the truth to come out. Uchenna felt the tumult of emotions swirling around him. Love for Ulima, anger towards Ineka, and a deep sadness for the family that had once been whole. He could see the devastation in his parents' eyes, but he refused to let their shame dictate his choices any longer. Your lies have only brought us pain, he said, addressing Ineka and his mother. We've all suffered because of your deceit, but no more. I choose my family, Ulima and Emeka, over this false pretense of a life you have constructed. Ulima watched as Ineka's plans crumbled before her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt powerful, her spirit no longer shackled by shame or fear. But as the reality of her confrontation sank in, she felt a sense of sorrow for the girl she once knew, now trapped in her own web of lies. As Uchenna's resolve hardened, Ineka suffered a breakdown, her cries echoing in the room. What have I done? She wailed. What have I done? Her voice raw with regret. I thought I could keep you with me. I didn't mean for it to end like this, Uchenna. Uchenna's heart ached for her, but he stood his ground. You need to face the consequences of your actions, Ineka. This is what happens when you choose deceit over honesty. With tears streaming down her face, Ulima felt as if a huge rock had fallen from her heart. Finally free from the weight of the past, the shame that had haunted her for years began to dissipate, replaced by a fierce determination to protect her son and rebuild her life. I need to be with my son, Ulima stated again, her voice firm. You can't hold me back any longer. Uchenna nodded in agreement, a sense of solidarity building between them. Together, they turned their backs on the chaos, determined to forge a path forward for their own family, ready to confront whatever challenges they lay ahead. This is where we end our story for the day, my dear readers. Please make sure to hit the notification bell to ensure you tune in for the next and last installment of Uchenna and Ulima's remarkable love story. And if you want to read more love stories like this, please check out the stories linked below. Thank you so much and see you next time. Bye.